Thanks for coming to our session, which is about how to start an app camp for girls in your location. And I'm really appreciative of 360 iDev for having us here to talk about this, and especially they're doing a recording which is going to be valuable for us. We get the question, how do I get app camp in my location pretty much every week? And I'm hoping we answer a lot of the questions that people in general have. So our plan here today is to talk about app camp a little bit, give you an overview of how it works and how we accomplish the goals we set for ourselves, and then open it up for questions from the audience, anything you want to know about what it takes to do this, what I consider a really awesome program, if I say so myself. We just finished our 4th summer. App Camp is a 1-week, currently it's a 1-week program at which girls learn how to brainstorm, design, code, present, pitch their apps, all in the space of 1 week, starting from, in many cases, from zero. A couple girls have done a little bit of programming, but usually most of the girls haven't done any. Our goal is that we'd like to see greater representation and eventually equality, gender equality in the software industry. So I think we all know that this is an issue for our community, and that we're really lucky because we do have a community that recognizes this and have had a lot of support from people like you, people who attend 360 iDev and other iOS conferences. The developer community has been incredibly, spectacularly supportive. So it feels like a project we're all working on together. Our idea is to get girls excited about software, and we like to think that we demystify the process. So before they come to App Camp, they look at their iPhones as something that is like created by demigods and some kind of software Valhalla that they couldn't actually recreate themselves. And in fact, one of the girls this summer in her survey notes, so we survey the girls before camp starts and then at the end of camp to sort of gauge what kind of impact we've had. And one of the girls said, like, they show you how to do things that seem impossible. So that was pretty exciting. We started out with a 1-day workshop during spring break in 2013, just to see if girls would be interested in what we were trying to offer, because App Camp, you know, there's a limit to how much we can do in 1 week. I think everybody knows that in this audience. There's a limit to what you can do in a month or a year, for that matter. The kinds of apps that we can build are not going to be Angry Birds or Kim Kardashian or whatever the kids are playing, Pokemon Go. So would they be interested in something that was like on the level of what you could build in a week? And they totally were. So basically, these 3 girls, just in the course of the day, came up with this idea for a dictionary app to which you could add your own words to the dictionary. So I didn't tell them, well, you can't actually do that, you know, in real life, because I knew this is a 1-day thing. But let's see how that would work. What kind of interface? What would it look like? So in the end, by the end of the day, they had this app, which you can kind of see on the screen. It basically was a text, text field, entry field, and a button to add that entry to a table, table view. So with purple and turquoise, and you can't see it here, but red text, every font, is used at App Camp for Girls. And they were so excited by this. And we only had this one, developer's phone that was provisioned at the time. And so we put it on one phone, and they just kept passing it around and adding words to it. They were so psyched. We knew, like, okay, I think that we don't need to make Angry Birds in a week. We might be able to make something a little more interesting than this dictionary app, and we'll probably see a lot of turquoise and purple, and that's okay. We're not trying to teach them to become professional developers in 1 week. We just want them to get excited. So that was our first camp. We called it Alpha Camp, and from that point, That summer, we added 2 one-week camps in Portland. Then we expanded to Seattle, eventually Vancouver, British Columbia. This summer, we added locations in Phoenix and Orange County. Altogether, we've done 15 sessions of App Camp in 4 summers. We've worked with over 170 girls, over 60 volunteers, and we've shipped over 100 apps on time and under budget. So I think we have a lot to brag about with what we've done in this short amount of time. The week starts off, like I said, with a brainstorming session where we show them, we have a little exercise for coming up with app ideas that are based on things that you really care about, and how you sort of start with a big idea and whittle it down to something that is basically the minimum viable product that could be shipped. And it's a short half-an-hour exercise for the whole group. And they come up with really big ideas, and we call it the Big Ideas Workshop. These are not the apps they're going to build during camp, but we think it's important for them to have that taste of like, these are my ideas, these are things I could get passionate about, and now I kind of know the process for, taking a big idea and translating it into something that would potentially be a viable app. And that we just think that's important for them, for after camp is over, to be inspired by something that they'd like to build themselves. We do design workshops, UI, and also icon design. Somebody once said to me on a podcast, I think your campers, your developers, which is what we call our participants, your developers know more about icon design than 95% of the developers on the App Store now. There's a lot of drawing, a lot of artwork that goes into the apps that they make during the week. And this, for some of the girls, they're really into it. Some of the girls are less interested in drawing and more interested in coding. And we try to balance out the teams so that everybody has something that they're really passionate about doing. Each girl gets an iPod Touch for the week to build their apps too. So we know, as you know, building to a simulator is not really the big thrill it is after you've done it maybe once. But building your first app that you built to a device that you can touch and other people can touch is one of those moments you never forget when you are learning how to develop apps. We think it's important for them not only to build to these devices, but be able to take the devices home and show them off at home to their family and to their friends. So they have the iPods the whole week. And we've never lost an iPod. In 15 sessions, I was looking, when I was preparing for this talk, I was looking at some old budgets that I had created, and I had actually built into the budget like lost iPods. And we haven't had to use that money at all, so that was pretty good. So far. I mean, it will happen someday. We have a very basic Xcode template that the girls build off of for the quizzes for the apps that they build during the week. And but it's summertime, so we also have to make it fun. It's not like school. We're not in a classroom where everybody's sitting in front of a computer. In fact, we only have one Mac per every 2 girls, so they have to work together. And they sit around tables and work together, sometimes with the computer, sometimes just on the art. So it doesn't feel like a computer center. It feels more like sometimes the classroom just looks like an arts and crafts class. But then there's hula hooping. We actually have a hula hooping instructor at several of our camps. Yoga. They make their own swag, so that we have a button maker. That's one of the pieces of equipment. Not a cheap piece of equipment either, that each camp has use of so along with the Macs and other things we budget for a button maker, and that's about $400 to $450 with shipping. So we go on a cool field trip to cool companies, and that was the girls' idea, actually. The first time we did App Camp, and that was a suggestion from a couple of the girls, like, couldn't we go on a field trip to see a software company? And Krista Mergen, who is in Portland, our design instructor, her husband is one of the designers at Panic, and she said, like, we should just get them to go to Panic. So now, basically, let's see, that Panic has sponsored a field trip for 4 summers in a row now. So there's going to be like 48 women applying for Panic jobs in the next decade. They all want to work at Panic now. And that'll be cool, because right now there's just one woman programmer there. And at the end of the week, we help them put together keynote presentations. We actually have a presentations coach who comes in and gives them public speaking workshops and rehearses them. And they pitch their apps to a small panel of women investors and entrepreneurs who give them encouragement, ask them questions, suggest ideas for future development. And that's how we cap off the week. So that's like our recital, a pitch panel. People sometimes ask me, is that like Shark Tank? And I'm like, no, nothing like Shark Tank. And in general at camp, one of our values is that this is not a competition. We are working collaboratively. The teams don't play off of each other. They don't try to be better than the other teams. And we mix the girls up during the week in other activities so they don't only stay with the same 4 girls, even though they work on one project together as a team. They also do some of the other stuff together with the other girls, because meeting other girls, meeting their peers is another goal, and an important goal of App Camp for girls. After camp is over, we put all their quizzes. So that's their big app that they build is a personality style quiz that, depending on what they do with the template, there's different ways, directions they can take it in. And that compendium of quiz apps is published on the App Store. It's 99 cents. It's the only app that I know of that has only 5-star reviews. I never tweet this, and please don't tweet it, because I'm quite sure that somebody will go in there and ruin our record. It was #1 in entertainment for a little while, even beating Disney's app. I didn't know that, and that's how I learned how little money you actually make being #1 in the entertainment category. I thought, oh, I think we're set for our budget, and then the next day the numbers come out, and I'm like, wow, it doesn't take much to become #1 in entertainment. So, oh well. I mean, it's very gratifying. It's great for the girls to be able to say they have a #1 app. It's great for them to say they have an app in the App Store at all. It's 99 cents because we don't believe in free. I mean, not that we don't believe in it in general, but I think it's important to model for them a program that values their work. And at 99 cents, they can buy it, their friends can buy it. We wouldn't make it more than that, God forbid. $1.99 would be way too expensive. But 99-cent app, I think it's important to do. And in general, throughout App Camp, and I'll talk about this a little later when we talk about how we finance it, is that we've always had the goal that this is not going to be a nonprofit run on a shoestring. We are not going to try to do it. We don't do bake sales. We raise money through corporate sponsorships and big crowdfunding sources and lots of very generous donors. And we show our volunteers that we value their work. We don't expect them to volunteer with absolutely no compensation because their time is super valuable. We're basically asking iOS developers to come and work for a week for free. And I don't think we would be sending the right message to the girls, even though they don't technically know what our arrangements with the volunteers are. But these are professionals. This is not to denigrate other types of camps, but it's not Girl Scouts. This is software development. It's an industry. So, yay for what we do for the girls. One of the things that I had not realized when we first started was until after one summer is that App Camp for Girls is a women's organization as well. So the volunteers that come together get to work with other women with similar interests. We provide a peer group for women who are interested in tech, maybe interested in being iOS developers. So all of our volunteers are not iOS developers when they come in, but some of them are now because, like the girls, they saw the process. They saw that we think that everybody can do this if they really want to, and they've gone on and become professional full-time iOS developers in their own right. So that's really cool. And just like the girls, we find Lesley, who's here with me from the Seattle camp. We both know how much we value this group of women we got to know. There were like 20 of us at WWDC this year at various conferences. We all got together. We, like the girls, we appreciated that we found this group of peers. And I think, so what I originally thought was we'd have an impact on the industry 10 years from now. We're already having an impact on it. It's small, but it's growing because we are having an impact on the adult volunteers as well. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Lesley Baker, who is the lead developer from our Seattle camp. And she's going to tell you a little bit about how we actually teach the girls how to make apps.
So the first thing I wanted to do was talk a little bit about our tools for the week. As Jean mentioned, we have 12 girls or developers there for the week. We're hoping to expand that to 20 by 2018. So we have 6 MacBook Pros with Xcode and Acorn installed on them, Acorn being a design app. We have iPod Touches for each of our developers. And then we also pass out drawing pads and markers and stencils to our developers to inspire their creativity during the week, which we can then scan into the apps later. And the hope is that we can actually bring in iPads with Swift Playgrounds as well at some point in the future. So the first app we start with is one you may be familiar with, Hello World. We do this to start to get our developers familiar with the Xcode environment as well as the Swift language. So I start off just talking about Xcode overall. I go through the project navigator and interface builder and how to build an app, and talk about dragging out a label, creating an outlet, updating the label, and then eventually dragging out a text field with a button that, after pressing the button, reads from the text field to update the label. And after doing all of this, I then pass out a packet to our developers so they can go through everything that I've talked about at their own pace. This also gives them something to reference later at home or after the week's over. The next thing we do is an exercise on how to make a cup of tea. So the point of this is to start to get our developers comfortable with how specific and how precise you have to be when working with computers. So we do a little bit of acting. We bring up 2 adult volunteers. One acts as a computer, and one writes down the instructions for that computer. And we have props. We have a mug, and a tea bag, and a kettle, and a jug of water. So usually water ends up everywhere. And that gives us an opportunity to talk about bugs in programs and what bugs are. The Seattle group was kind of funny this year in that they didn't want to fix their bug. They thought it was really funny that the computer dropped the jug of water on the floor instead of putting it on the table. So they said, leave it, leave it. So I talked about how sometimes, yeah, you do leave bugs in your program if you're on a tight timeline, and kind of incorporated that into the curriculum. The next app we work on is a calculator app. In this case, we actually provide some template code for our developers to start from. It has some buttons and text fields and labels. We also do something called code banks. And code banks are a file that we include in the project that has all of the code necessary to populate the functions, but it's all out of order. So they have to logically think through the steps that would be necessary to make that function work. And I'll demo at the front of the room the add function. As well as this year, we actually incorporated playgrounds too, so that I could talk about different variable types in playgrounds, as well as show them if-else statements. I'll give them some time to work on this. They break into groups, and they do the add function, subtract, multiply, and divide, and actually build them to their iPods at this time. Usually they'll come up with some bugs or enhancement requests, and so we'll get back together as a group and talk through what those are. And these are things like the layout will get messed up when you go into landscape, or if you try to divide by 0, you crash your app. And so we've intentionally left in these features, or you bring up the keyboard and it's the text keyboard versus the numeric keyboard. So, and that's the end of our first day. So we cover a lot. Jean was just mentioning earlier that we sometimes will get emails from parents just saying, whoa, what's coming for the second day? So the second day. We start talking about more design pieces at this point, what makes good design, as well as grid layout. And we introduce our third and final app that takes us through the rest of the week, our quiz app. And with the quiz app, we also provide some template code for our developers to work from, as well as code banks. And the quiz app is the one, as Jean was mentioning, that ends up in the app compendium. So hopefully everybody has that. If you don't, you should. It's a very fun app. And what it is you have this introductory screen. You have 5 question screens with 4 answers for each question, 4 possible results, and then a credit screen. And with the quiz app, there's a lot of content, a lot of code, and so it's really important to chunk the explanations here. So I'll spend time initially just introducing the quiz app conceptually so they can start brainstorming ideas and questions. Then I'll do another chunk around imagery, and so we'll talk about how you can't just pull images off the internet, that there's this thing called copyright. So we really ask them to draw their own images or use images that they take that aren't personally identifiable. We also talk about image naming, and image sizing is also important, as we found one year when we somehow didn't talk about image sizing and ended up with these images that were huge in their apps. A next chunk I'll talk about is the questions and the question code and the question view controllers. And at this point, I'll bring in some higher level concepts talking about classes and objects. And I use a combination of playgrounds, and then I also bring in my son's little spider robot and talk about how toy manufacturers might have this template for a toy, which would be a class, and then they have all these toys stamped out, which would be the objects. And so kind of bring that all together. And then I'll talk about the results and how we create the results. And in that case, we'll do more acting, where we have some volunteers come up to the front. And we do some pseudocode talking through, with this results array, what an array is and how you're passing this results array through the different questions. So here's a quiz app example from our Seattle camp, not this summer, but last summer, as far as would you survive a zombie apocalypse? And you can survive a day, a week, a month, or you can survive the apocalypse. So when I took the quiz, I was a little bummed because I only survived a month. But then fortunately, one of the developers told me, she said, it's actually a good thing. And I said, what? She said, you kind of have to make some questionable decisions to actually survive the apocalypse. So it means you're a good person. So in summary, if you only remember 3 things, which I know you'll remember a lot more than that, but it's really important throughout the week when teaching to provide enough detail to our developers, but not too much that their eyes are glazing over. And it's kind of a delicate balance. And so also providing resources for learning more. On the last day, I pass out a sheet that has a bunch of links to blogs and books, as well as talks about things they can do with the community, such as the Technovation Challenge or applying for a WWDC scholarship. Another thing is, it's more than the code, coming in with more of a developer focus. It was great to see this is App Camp, and so we talk about coding, but we also really spend time on brainstorming ideas and design and testing and project management and marketing, and then presenting your app to it, or pitching your app to a panel. And most importantly, to build excitement for the week. Or from the week. And our developers, we want them to absorb as much as possible from that week, but we really want them to look back on that experience and think of it very positively.
So I want to just wrap up with some of the nuts and bolts of what it takes to put on App Camp. So for the basics are really location and people in terms of what you need to get. And I would actually put camp organizer above this because they're the person who would choose the location. But until you have a location, you don't have a date. And if you don't have a date, you don't have volunteers. So and our goal with as we've learned, like from year to year, is to get that location identified in the fall, because by the time all the paperwork and everything gets settled, we like to start registering kids like in March, like put it out there. So, because some parents plan early, some plan late. It really depends, but we don't, we do hear from people if we don't get those applications ready before middle of March. So getting the location nailed down is important. Each camp has an organizer, and in each case, that organizer is not usually an iOS developer, but somebody who is, software technically savvy, like someone who understands something of the process. Our organizers are project managers, pretty much, when I think about it, all like project managers. It makes sense now. I hadn't really thought about it before. So that's the person who's going to be overseeing, finding the location, recruiting the volunteers, or at least recruiting somebody, to be a volunteer coordinator. That person will need some kind of assistance, certainly during the week, because even though it's only 12 girls, it's very one-on-one intensive, and there's a lot going on. We did it with 6 volunteers the first time, and it was just insane. And because 3 of them are managing teams, so 3 are project team managers. They have 4 girls each. There's the lead developer, like Lesley, an iOS developer who is the instructor, and that person has to be a professional iOS developer, somebody who's at least, submitted apps to the App Store, understands what process, understands Xcode, is able to troubleshoot, and also to work with like enhancements that the girls ask for. So that's probably our biggest bottleneck, is finding that person and supporting them, because there aren't that many women iOS developers, relatively speaking. It's a chicken and an egg problem. But we're doing a lot better. Now we have 5 sessions, 5 locations with 6 sessions that we've identified more and more people as we go. We also have a design instructor and a presentations coach who are part-time. The design instructor comes like Tuesday, Wednesday to talk about design, do a workshop with the girls, but then also help them with their projects on Wednesday, just go around individually helping them with any problems they have with scanning or Acorn or with the design itself. The presentations coach comes on Thursday. I consider them, they're like our fresh recruit at the end of the week. We need somebody who can like rev the girls up for one more day. And, public speaking is probably not the favorite activity of most of our participants, but they always rally, they always, step up to the plate, and we get such incredible comments from the audience, from the panel, about what poise our girls have and how good they are at making presentations. And parents come up to me as well and say, well, I've never seen my daughter present before. I didn't know she was that good. It's, they just learn a few tricks, and they're in a very supportive environment, and they're on a team, so it's not, public speaking, oratory. It's working together, and they rehearse. And it's a very short presentation. Basically, that whole presentation session, it starts at 1:30 on Friday, and it's mostly done by 2:15, usually at the latest. And that's including, also just introducing the panel and introducing the volunteers. So I would say their presentations last like 5 to 10 minutes, but it really is it's a great feature. And we realized that after the first year, we needed somebody to come in to make that part good, because the regular team was pretty much like spent just getting the code done and getting apps finished, and it's paid off. Another part of having a camp is fundraising. We do a lot of fundraising from the headquarters, and we launched App Camp with an Indiegogo campaign that ended up raising $100,000. And we did a second Indiegogo campaign last year to sort of get us to this point of expanding. But crowdfunding, if anybody's done it, is it's hard work and it's not a sustainable way to fund long-term a nonprofit. However, for a local group, it would be a cool way to get your local people involved and not have a $100,000 goal, but a $10,000 or $20,000 goal, depending. A lot of the costs that are involved depend on what happens at the location where you are. So we, just like back of the napkin, budget a camp at $10,000. Like I like to overestimate what each camp will cost, and that includes the location, the snacks. There's a very important feature of App Camp that we have 2 snack breaks a day. That was something we learned after like one day of camp, was that we had to have snacks all the time, and not just in the afternoon. We go to Costco and we just buy grosses of goldfish and trail mix and things like that, and that goes over very well. But one of the biggest chunks of the budget does go to volunteer stipends. So in general, most of the volunteers get, the full-time volunteers, right now we budget $500 stipend for each person. We know that they are worth more than that they can make more than that in a week. But that's about what works with our budget right now. We're not trying to pay them, but we do feel it's important to defray the costs of volunteering. It could be transportation, it could be childcare, it could be many things. So if you have 7 full-time volunteers and $500 stipends right there, that's $3,500. So the $10,000, once you start looking at those costs, definitely, it starts to add up. But some of our locations get their space donated. Some of them get charged a lot for their space. Some of them get food donated, and some of them don't. It depends on what that local organizer, what their connections are, what their strengths are, what they want to focus on. I personally believe it's more important to fundraise and put your money into fundraising than to run around trying to get a lot of lunches and snacks donated, because in an hour worth of time in fundraising, you could raise potentially $1,000, and you could spend a day trying to get somebody to donate 5 pizzas. So, but that's me. Everybody's going to be a little different. Everybody has different strengths. So we try to work with the local team to work with their strengths. There's some administrative overhead. There's insurance. There's the cost of the paid staff that we have for App Camp, and there's and the cost of the equipment. We have to dole that out over. So a set of equipment right now, as Lesley pointed out, is 6 MacBook Pros, 15-inch MacBook Pros, 12 iPod Touches, 3 scanners, maybe a projector depending on the location, maybe a button maker, and so it can run $15,000 to $20,000 worth of equipment. And next year it's going to be more expensive, because I'm pretty committed to having iPad Pros for all the girls. I don't see how we can not do Swift playgrounds on iPad with the girls next year. That's where Apple is putting their money. Apple is looking at us. Apple's been pretty interested in what we're doing, and they want to see what we do with Swift playgrounds for iPad. So iPads are not cheap. They're not as expensive as computers, but so we have to work out. But we do use those sets of equipment in multiple locations and over multiple years. So depending, on how many camps we're going to have next year and what kind of deal we can get on those iPads, that's going to be part of it. I think that planning on fundraising $20,000 to $30,000, depending on your location, is a good, number to keep in mind. And we would support you in that fundraising. I mean, we've done it ourselves. We have a consultant, nonprofit fundraising consultant, who does training with our volunteers, like one-on-one plus in groups, and it's just an invaluable resource for fundraising knowledge and advice. We would work with you to figure out, your budget and how it would work, and how you could get to that fundraising goal that we, would identify together as the one you need to have to start out camp. And it's actually more fun than you think because app camp, people love it. It's one of the easiest things I've ever had to sell. People want to know how to support app camp, and that's just been awesome. So that's the overview of what it takes. And we do have at least 10 minutes, I think, for questions. So let me open it up for you all, and thanks for listening. Yes?
Is the lead iOS developer, does it have to be a woman?
Yes. Yes, our team is all women.
All
Yes, or actually not exclusively women. I should reiterate that it's App Camp is for girls and for underrepresented genders in our industry. So trans person, gender queer, gender fluid. There's, we work with girls and with volunteers who either identify as female or identify as one of those underrepresented groups. But for us, it's important to have the role models to show this is what you can do this too. Did that answer your question? Okay. Go ahead.
How do you find girls to participate, or how do you recruit them?
We put the word out in various ways. We do press releases. We do Facebook has been a big source of finding campers or developers, aspiring developers, because that reaches parents, not kids, of course, we all know. But kids are not the ones making these decisions. We know based on their surveys that very often their parents, so getting the parents interested. There is actually, all the camps have a registration fee. This year it was $400, so the parents have to be behind it as well. We do offer fee waivers, for financial, if somebody's not financially able to pay the whole fee, we have sort of a sliding scale. But we think it's important for people to value the camp as they would any other camp. It's we try to price it at a level that's consistent with other camps that have that kind of program. So it does not cover the cost of camps. I mean, you can do the math, but it does defray the cost, and that's good. But honestly, if you don't charge people, the chances of all 12 girls showing up, they go down to, unfortunately, as we all know. Carl.
Can you talk a little bit about the panel?
Oh, sure. So we recruit women from the local business community. We've had a whole range of interesting participants on that panel. We sort of work through connections that we know. Usually there's somebody on the team who knows who's more of a networker than others. That's good, like any other team, balancing out those strengths. And we're also trying to focus a little more on trying to bring that, we've had some companies this summer who sponsored App Camp and provided a member of the panel. So those are people who come and see the results of App Camp and could be inspired, to go back to their companies and try to rally more support for App Camp. So it started out as an idea for showing girls yet another thing you could be in this industry. The business person, the person who has all the money, you could be a woman and be a venture capitalist. We've had venture capitalists on the panel, but it's also become we should definitely leverage these incredible women who are coming in and help get them on the team supporting the campus. Yes. They're mostly 13 and 14.
They're incoming 8th and 9th graders. So
yeah, we don't have an specific age thing, but more based on what year school they're in. Yeah.
On the hardware equipment, is each like local camp responsible for purchasing or like renting it, or do you ship the hardware?
Right now, we're shipping the hardware, so we own 3 sets of that equipment, and we have Pelican cases that are custom made for our equipment, and they have now been shipped all over the country and driven slightly under the radar into Canada and left there. I can't. This is being recorded.
I know.
Watch out. No, we lend our team in Canada a set of equipment as well, but they still belong to us. We did not export anything. Yes.
If someone wanted to get one of these started, and you said by the fall you'd like to identify the location, if there a location, a couple volunteers who would be identified in the fall, does that mean there's a possibility of running it next summer, or do you need some of the volunteers to go through the camp process first?
Well, we're talking about doing like a spring orientation for. I mean, the main person who really needs that. I don't know. This summer we actually sent our experienced iOS developers to the new camps. We might do it that way next year because that's a pretty tall order. But bring an organizer or another iOS developer recruit to some kind of orientation in Portland or Seattle or wherever we decide to do it. But it's not out of the question. It could be next summer. It would have to be a pretty motivated group. That I know. I think we have time for like one more question. Sure. It needs to be a room that will hold at least 4 like big folding tables that can be rearranged pretty easily. Like maybe half of the space that's in this room. It has to have Wi-Fi for sure. It has to have a place where the girls can go to be outside and like sort of take activity breaks. So if we did one in a downtown area, we haven't done that yet, and we're looking at some things in other locations right now that we'll have to identify a way for them to have breaks that also feels secure. Right now, all of our camps are in places that are like you would have no problem having your 13 or 14-year-old running around, but if it was say downtown Chicago, I might feel a little more like, well, we need to have very specific guidelines where the girls can go and a certain level of supervision that we don't need in Portland. But it is nice working with older kids because some of them just come on the bus by themselves, and it's pretty. It's much less stressful than working with little ones. So, yeah, I think. What else?
So in Seattle, it's nice to have a separate room too for the volunteers to be able to just kind of group, or so then they're not trying to talk in the same room that the developers are learning in. So you have a separate space for volunteers to stash their stuff and also just talk through ideas or how the week's going. And then we also have a presentation space. So we have a space, which I guess you could use one of those rooms as a presentation space.
Done that. Yeah.
In Seattle, we have a church that we're at. We're not religiously affiliated, but we still use the church space, and it's great because we have this huge room at the end of the week that we can do the presentations in.
Anything else? We're going to be around. Lesley and I are going to go to lunch. I think we're going to go do the Henry's option, so we go somewhere inside where we can chit-chat, and if anybody wants to join us for lunch for fun or for talking about App Camp, we'd love to hang out with you. Thanks so much for coming and listening.